请到我们张磊博士。这个张博士的话，他是从我们这个著名的汉堡埃本多夫大学的医疗中心的系统神经科学研究院获得博士学位。然后目前呢，他是在这个维也纳大学Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience Unit 从事他的这个博士后研究。他做的工作也是非常的有趣的这个工作啊，他是主要是在利用我们能够测到的各种这个生理的信号啊，然后这个脑影像的信号啊，然后去用这个计算建模的方法，特别是贝叶斯网络、贝叶斯模型这一套理论，去建模我们这个决策的这样的一个行为，而且是把这个决策的行为放在不同的这个条件下来进行建模，所以是非常有意思的一些工作。然后张博士前期的这个成果呢，也是在 Nature Neuron Science Advances 这些著名的期刊上面都有发表。今天就是我们很高兴邀请到张博士给我们做这样一个关于人脑决策的一个这个报告。就是我们每天的这个决策大大小小的每天都在做啊，但是我们人脑做决策就不像那个计算机，对吧？就是说我把这个运筹学，我把这个目标函数、约束条件列好，我就用一个最优化求解得到一个最优的这个决策出来。人脑的决策的话，我们做决策是在一个非常 noisy 的这样一个environment 里面，那我们会受到各种各样的影响，其中也包括一些，比如说像情绪啊，还有就是说这个社交活动、社交互动，那么这些都是会对人脑做决策的这样一个过程有一个很显著的影响。那么今天就是有请我们张博士为我们带来这样一个关于人脑做决策的这样的一个学术报告。那么下面就有请我们张博士来给大家做报告。
好的，十分感谢这个罗强教授的邀请和这个非常有意思的一个介绍。然后呢，今天非常高兴能够来到这里，虽然说是在线的一个报告，但是还是很开心能够跟大家分享一下我所做的一些工作。现在呢，我是在奥地利，但是刚才就是罗老师提到我这个主要的工作，就是今天要讲的这个，其实是在汉堡做的。之前在汉堡的时候，所以我在这里边把2个单位都放在这里了。然后刚开始的时候，因为郝彤也没在，我跟罗老师稍微交流了一下，就是大概因为我有好多东西不太会用中文说，然后这个报告呢，可能就是先用这个英文讲。但是如果大家有任何问题，哪一个地方有任何问题没听懂，然后都可以就是在评论里头那个可以说，或者最直接的就是说说你讲慢点你听不懂也可以，然后就是中间如果我有不懂的地方，我可以尝试翻译一下，但反正就整体的这个大概的过程就是想用英文讲。然后其实另外一个目的就是说，因为这个今天也在录像嘛，在录屏，然后如果说用英文讲的话，之后放在哔哩哔哩也好啊 YouTube 也好啊，就是更多人会看到，然后就是稍微免去了一些这个人工手动翻译的一个过程。希望大家见谅啊，如果对我有这个就用英语讲的决定有任何意见的话，只能烦请见谅。这个咱们现在就开始吧。Okay, then let me just thank Professor Luo Qiang again for this kind introduction and also the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be here, even though virtually, and it's a great pleasure to be able to present my work. I'd like to start with a big picture. So let's first talk about birth instead of talking about brains. So for example, if we are interested in the flight behavior of a bird, why or how a bird can fly, so we cannot only study the feather. So even though the feathers, they are the physical hardware that allows the bird to fly, but we do have to understand the feather in the contents of flight and how the features of feathers could help to achieve this goal of flight. So in short, there are 3 distinct levels for this kind of understanding proposed by David Marr in the 80s. And David Marr, by the way, is a vision neuroscientist, if you have never heard about him. But actually, the 3 levels of analysis is quite prominent in the field of neuroscience, and also in nearly all the kind of computational fields. So the 3 levels from David Marr, they are the computational level and the algorithm level and the implementation level. So what they mean? So the computational level, the computation is in fact at the top. Basically, that determines what is the problem. So what is the goal the animal or the human they want to achieve. In this case, the goal is to fly, and this is the output that we could observe. We could observe that the bird is flying, and then this is the computation the bird is trying to solve, or the goal the bird is trying to achieve. And what is the algorithm? And the algorithm is, we could imagine that by flapping the wings, and then the bird is able to fly. And then the flapping is instantiated by the physical implementation, the hardware of the feathers. So then the implementation part is in fact the lowest level according to David Marr. So this is the physical level, the implementation level. You might just curious, why am I talking to you about this? Why am I telling you about this? And how this can be relevant or interesting to understand the brain as well. So here, this is again the table taken from the original book from David Marr. And why am I telling this is because as quoted by David Marr, and he once said that in the book, in fact, so trying to understand perception by understanding neurons is like trying to understand a bird's flight by studying only feathers. It just cannot be done. So what that means, so after this saying in his book, he actually proposed the three levels of analysis. And the overall picture of the idea is that we can not only understand, it's not preferred, or it is not so much interesting if we only focus on one aspect. So we have to make the distinctions among the three levels, and we could understand everything separately, and then to join them together. Because even though there is the distinction of the three levels of analysis, the goal is to make a big picture and then try to understand what is computation, okay? So what does that mean in terms of social neuroscience? So not surprisingly, the Marr's three level could also be applied to the field of social science or social neuroscience. And we could again define the three levels of the problem we are trying to solve in terms of social behavior or social neuroscience. Three levels: computation, algorithm, and implementation. We could imagine in the first place, what is the goal we want to achieve in the social context, in the social environment? It can be cooperation, can be competition, can be observational learning. One example can be that you might be cooperating with others because you would like to achieve the same goal, and then you have to cooperate with other people, and then you work together, you jointly achieve the same goal. And in the competitive context, it might be that you are about to compete against others because there is only a limited amount of resource, and only the winner can get the majority amount of the resource, and then the defeated person cannot really get too much of it. And another example is observational learning. So we will actually focus a little bit more about the observational learning here today. So observational learning essentially means that you do not learn from your own direct experience. You learn from observing the others. And then this is also called vicarious experience or vicarious learning. Vicarious basically means the second-hand experience, not direct. So all of those are examples of the goals we would like to achieve in a social environment, but by what's algorithm? And the algorithm can be classified into a few categories. According to the literature, it can be a reinforcement learning problem, it can be a cognitive map problem, it can be a benefit-cost trade-off problem. And then there are different kind of models. And if we are talking about computational models, it happens here. And those are the computational models that we might be interested in. And the lower level, as I mentioned, this is the implementation level, and this is the brain. So we would like to see what's brain area or circuits, connectivities, or neurons, or everything. So that the physical, the hardware that is enabling the computational algorithm. And then here we observe the behavioral output. Okay, so this is the general framework of using the Marr's 3 levels to understand social behavior or social neuroscience. Then this is the bigger picture. And keep that in mind, we will be going back and forth for this understanding. Good. Using this framework, in fact, we could understand a little bit of my work. So under this framework, I could then jump into what I've been doing. So my work in the past few years has been focusing on the neurocomputational mechanisms underlying social decision making. And this, at the first place, is quite vague. You have really no idea by what I mean if I tell you I would like to understand the neurocomputational mechanism underlying social decision making. But if we know the Marr's 3 levels, then it becomes clearer what I mean by saying this. So this neural part, then that is implementation level, implemental level, and then this computational part is basically here, refers here, the algorithmic level. And in particular, me and also other researchers in the field, they are interested in, or we are interested in, whether there is a so-called social specificity as opposed to more non-social domain or more domain general cognitions. For example, whether in this level, whether there is a same or different algorithm that are used in social versus non-social tasks. And here at this brain or implementation level, whether there's the same or different brain areas that are recruited during social versus non-social tasks. Good. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, then I will just proceed. So one way to understand this thing, to see if there's a social specificity in terms of social neuroscience, one way to understand that is to design and conduct experiments. So imagine, because I did this work in Hamburg, and so imagine that you are new to Hamburg. Imagine this scenario, okay? Imagine that you're new to Hamburg, and if you are a beer person, you like beer, or maybe if you like juice, maybe you can take the juice as my example as well. But here, let's just take the beer example. If you're a beer person, if you have the knowledge that Germany is famous for beer, and if you're new to Hamburg, you would like to sample a local beer from the supermarket, some beer from their local market. And when you just go to the supermarket and then you find this one, you might be interested in this one because you just like the design of the bottle. Imagine that you are new to this city and you have no idea about what is going on. You just like the design of the bottle. And then the next second, there are 4 teenagers. They are from the local neighborhood and then they know what is a good beer, they know what is not a good beer. So there are basically 4 people, they come around you and then all of them, they pick another beer in this green color. And the question here is basically, what do you do at this moment? Do you still stick with your own initial choice? You just stick with your own initial choice. You do not really care about what the others are doing. You just want your own beer. Or you might just switch your choice towards the group. So here there's a group, right? If you see all of them are choosing this beer, you might just switch from your initial decision to the group decision. And then this kind of scenario, what you have just experienced, is a phenomenon called social influence, not surprisingly, and understanding the mechanisms underlying social influence has been of considerable interest in the field of psychology and neuroscience, in particular social neuroscience, social psychology as well. Good. So in a typical social influence study, what we have seen from the literature is that participants, they will have to make a first decision. For example, if the researchers are asking the participants, how would you rate the attractiveness of the face? 1 being unattractive at all, 8 being very attractive. So the participants, they just have to rate the attractiveness of the face on a scale. So then the participant will make a first choice, for example, 6 out of this 1 to 8 scale. And then the researcher will give the participants a so-called social information. And it can be, the cover story can be that, well, the average opinion within your age group. So if the participant is 22 years old, and then the researcher could tell the participant the average rating in between the age 18 and 25, something like that, they rate a 8. Okay, so here is the social information. It is given to the participants. And then the second choice is allowed from the researcher. So the researcher asks the participants one more time, how would you rate this same face? So here, usually the measurement is to see whether the 6 will be changed towards the group information, or maybe the opposite, or maybe it stays the same. Okay, good. So this is a typical structure of understanding or studying social influence. And what we have seen is actually this kind of structure or paradigm. There is this challenge, not very small, it's non-trivial. So this structure being the first choice, social information, and then the second choice, however, it just suffers a little bit this challenge in the sense that no feedback is given to the participants. So hence, there's no direct measurement of their internal value representation. So what that means? That means if I choose 6, I was told the other group of people, they choose 8. And then I change either from 6 to 7, or maybe I do not trust them. I change from 6 to 5. There is no ground truth. I have no idea which is more correct, which is incorrect. And there's no feedback. I have no idea if this is rewarding or not rewarding, for example. So to better overcome this challenge, we have to go to another kind of subfield in the literature. So we go to the field of goal-directed learning. So what is goal-directed learning? Let me explain a little bit. So we have the choice problem, right? We have a rating problem, and then we make a choice. And then this choice problem can be decomposed into several phases or steps. Essentially, the first thing you have to do is to imagine what you are supposed to do. So this is the representation. You are sitting in front of the computer, and then you just have to figure out what you're supposed to do. Why am I here? Why am I making the button press? So this is the representation part. And then the second is the valuation. You might just have internal valuation about how much the face is attractive or not. So you have a valuation, and then you do the evaluation. Based on your evaluation, you make a choice. Good. These are the 3 phases in the previous example. And we are interested in the feedback. So suppose there's a feedback, and then there's an outcome. Basically, feedback and outcome, they're the same thing. Suppose there is an outcome, and then we could observe the outcome, and we could use or utilize the outcome to inform ourselves, inform our future learning. And here is actually called learning, in the sense that if I choose something, if the choice is rewarded, then I might consider that the choice is valuable. And then I might want to repeat the previously rewarded choice. And then this is done through learning. Okay, so this frame is already trying to give you an idea of reinforcement learning models, but I will just cover that later. Good. So here, adding these 2 components, actually adding only this one component, outcome, it enables or facilitates learning. And then this is quite important for us to understand social behavior in this sense. So the current study is, as I mentioned, there are 2 fields. One is social influence, the other one is goal-directed learning. So we are interested in the intersection of these 2 subfields to investigate neurocomputational mechanisms of social influence in goal-directed learning, specifically also to answer the questions from David Marr, and I will show you a little bit later in 2 slides. So I will ask you to hold a second to think about what or where does the social influence come from? So in the previous example, I make a choice, I rate the face, and then the researcher, they told me, well, there is average group, they rate 8, and this is the social influence, and this is manipulated, okay? It's possible, so it's researchers are using that for ages, and ages is a good tool to manipulate social influence. And we might just also think about, okay, so the average social influence is given by the researcher, and but how? In the sense that where does the average rating come from? So they come from individual ratings of the others, right? So this is the idea. So the idea here is basically that everyone is doing the same thing. So you are rating a face. So suppose that there are 100 people, you are rating the face, and then there are another 99 people, they're also rating the face. And then the researchers, supposedly, if there is a real group of 99 people, they are rating the face, the researchers will take the average and then give the average back to you. And then this is the social influence. So what can be done a little bit differently is that when we have the 99 ratings individually, why would we take the average? Why not using the actual individual ratings? And then the individual ratings, they're actually their own evaluation, how much they think the face is attractive or not. So what we can think about this problem is that there is a direct learning part or direct experience. You rate the attractiveness of the face. This is your own direct experience. Then there are the other people, so they also rate the faces, and you are observing, they rating the faces, and relative to yourself, this is a observational experience or vicarious experience in this case. And in particular, when there is feedback given to everyone in the environment, this can also be called social learning or observational learning, okay? Because as we mentioned, the framework, if there is a feedback available, then everyone could learn from observing or evaluating the feedback. So then in this case, we have the direct learning and the observational learning. And before we move forward, and it is actually worth mentioning that the social learning or observational learning has received a lot of attention in the recent years in both human studies and animal studies. I wouldn't really go to the details, but these papers are really interesting. I really highly recommend reading that. And so the central question here in the behavioral level and also at the neural level is, again, the Marr level, the same thing. So to ask or to find out if there is a social specificity, either in terms of the algorithm, the computational model, how this computation is achieved, by which computation, and also the second level, the brain is, the implementation level is that whether the same or different social specificity is there at the brain level. It can be that, well, it's in fact the case that in some studies, researchers find that self-learning and the other or social learning, they kind of recruited the same or similar brain areas. And in some other studies, they find out that maybe self-learning is associated one part of the brain and observational learning is associated with another part of the brain. Good. And then we could go back to our research question. So our research question is basically, so how does knowing about other people's decision influence my own choice in the same learning environment? Everyone is learning the same thing, and you learn your thing, I learn my thing. But we have the opportunity to observe each other's choices and how this observation could affect my initial choice, right? Like the beer example. And so what is the underlying algorithm by which social influence is integrated into my own decision-making? So this is more about algorithmic level. And then how such computation is implemented in the brain, and if there's a difference between self-learning and other learning or social learning in terms of the brain implementation. So these three questions, as I termed already, you see the difference. So one is behavioral results. We can observe or measure the behavior. And then here we could imply computational modeling. And then the last part, we could use functional neural imaging. And then this fits pretty well to the Marr 3 levels of computation, algorithm, and implementation. Good. Any questions before I go to the paradigm, the specific experimental design?
May I ask a question? So when you see the goal-directed learning, like in those experiments you introduced, those scenarios. So what is exactly the reward?
Here. Do you mean there, right?
So, yeah, what is the reward in this?
It might not be in this example. So if you know this two-armed bandit task, two-choice task, so there are two choice symbols. And if you choose one, you will either receive a win or a loss. So this is the reward.
Is that depend on the rating you give? You choose.
Yeah, I mean, so not in this particular task. This particular task, I'm not really sure if we could really use a feedback. Because here it is subjective rating, right? Subjective, it's subjective. Yeah, yeah, there's no ground truth about that.
Yeah, you can choose whatever you like. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So actually, if we proceed, we will see the experiment. We didn't really have a subjective rating task. We have a learning task. So you make a choice, you will be able to receive reward or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, this is a bit confusing. Okay, good. Any other questions? Okay, good. Yeah. So the paradigm or the experimental design is, so we unfortunately cannot let participants drink beer inside MRI scanners. Instead, we use abstract fractals. They are just abstract symbols and no specific meaning. They mean nothing to the participant, essentially. So the core of the paradigm is a probabilistic reversal learning task. So here the reward means, or feedback means something, right? Relative to, as opposed to the subjective rating. So in the probabilistic reversal learning task, so we have two stimuli. We have a blue option and a yellow option. So one stimulus is always more rewarding than the other. So at the beginning, choosing the blue, you will receive more reward relative to choosing yellow. And after a few trials, the blue one becomes worse, and then the yellow one becomes better. So this reversal happens back and forth for multiple times, and the duration is not always fixed. So here, how long does that last? How long does that last? It's followed by a uniform distribution between 8 and 12. So basically every 8 to 12 trials, there's a reversal, and participants, they did not know that, so they have to observe the feedback. They learn, they learn and constantly learn to receive, to try to figure out what is more rewarding, which is what is not so rewarding. So essentially, they always have to learn. And then the goal for the participants is to maximize the reward after the experiment. So they will receive more money if they perform well in this experiment. This probabilistic reversal learning task is not so special in the literature. The people use it a lot to study a choice flexible behavior and or choice adaptive behavior. There's nothing social here. And sorry, what is? And so the social part is there's non-social here. And what is the social part? The social component on top of that is introduced by recruiting 5 participants at the same time. So in the sense that they perform the task all together at the same time. So as I told you in this rating example, there is a face and you are rating the face and there are other people rating the face and you are able to see the choices of the others and you will imagine how that will affect your own choices. And the goal of everyone is to maximize the reward after in this learning task. So we have this group decision-making task. There will always be 5 participants in the group. And always same genders, either 5 male or 5 female participants, and we recruited nearly 200 participants, and one is inside the scanner, and then the other 4, they're outside, they sit together. So in this kind of cartoon illustration, we could see that it's always that one person is in the scanner, and we scan the brain activity from one participant within the group, and the other 4 players, they're outside, and their behavior are connected via computer. So if I choose blue, the other people will see that I am choosing blue. So everything is connected. There is no deception. So everything is truly real. So before I go forward, I thought 2 questions. Why 8 to 12 reversal? So 8 to 12 reversal is, so if you are familiar with the reinforcement learning literature, you will be able to see that actually after 5 to 8 trials, people are already able to learn what is a better option, which is a better option, which is a worse option. So here, if we increase this one from maybe on average 10, right? This is on average 10. So if we increase the average length from 10 to perhaps 20, they will learn pretty well. What that means? That means they can learn based on their own experience already. They do not even have to pay attention to the choices of the others. So if they do not pay attention, if they do not have to pay attention to the others, then there's no aim of doing these social experiments. They can just focus on their own study, own choices without looking at the others. So here, to make it relatively shorter, the purpose is basically to increase the chance that they pay attention to the others. So they might feel this is changing a lot, and they are unsure, and their own learning is a little bit uncertain. And in this case, they might have a potential to seek help from the others. And another question is how the participants will communicate. They do not really communicate. They sit together, they do not talk, they just only see the choices of the others. But you will see that later in the next slides. Good. So here you will understand better about how this is done. So we have the procedure. Every time there are 5 people, they come into the lab, and we first take pictures of everyone. And if you are the first person, you will see the choices, the pictures, sorry, you will see the pictures of the participants number 2 to number 5. So everyone is observing the other 4 people. They do not see themselves. Doesn't make sense. The very beginning is that people will have to make a first choice between the blue and the yellow. Okay, so your choice. And then the participants will also have to give a badge. So the badge I will explain later. So just keep in mind, this is a badge. Badge is 1, 2, 3. It's kind of a rating. So 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. And here the badge and the choice, both of the choice and the badge, they are like private. So people, not private is not the word. People will also see it, but it's the self-choice. People make a self-choice. People make a self-bet. And after that, because everyone is making choices, right? We will ask the participants to find out which one they want to see. So we did not show all those 4 choices all together to the participants. Instead, we gave the participants the opportunity to find out according to their own preference. So for example, if I make a choice, if I rate a 2, and then here, after everyone is finished, I perhaps would like to see the choice of the second person in the first place. And then later I would ask, well, what is the choice of this first person? And then finally, there will be a stage where all of the choices they are presented underneath the picture. So I see who is choosing what. And after this part, if I'm the participants, I have the opportunity to change my choice and also change my bet. So in this case, if you still remember, I initially chose blue, and then now I switched from blue to yellow so that I'm more in line with the group. The bet can also be adjusted. So in fact, here, the bet is switched from 2 to 3. So very lastly, we will also see that here we have the other people's choices, both the first and also the second, and also the reward. And for self, both the choice and the bet, they together determine the outcome of the participants. So here you will see the betting more clearly. So the betting is essentially a multiplier. We have a reward unit of 20 cents. If it is a win, though it wins 20 cents. If it is a loss, then it loses 20 cents. And then this amount will be multiplied with the bet. So here, if the betting is 3, I will win 60 cents in this case. Good. So let me just go back again. So my own choice, my own bet, I can see sequentially the choices of the others. And after I have seen the choices of the others, I could change my choice. I could also change my bet. And according to my second choice and my second bet, I will receive the reward, either the win or a loss. And I will also be able to see the choices and the feedback, the outcome from the others. So this is the task. Any questions regarding the task? This is quite important to understand, otherwise you will get lost. Well, if not, let me just proceed. Okay, good. You might just wonder why we design such a thing like this. It's not the easiest task in the world, but every time we, as an experimenter, we have to recruit 5 people, and this is a lot of effort. So actually, most of the time we recruited 6 participants, so that if one person didn't show up, and we could have a backup. And for the participants, this is also quite demanding. So they have to make their own choice and their own bet. They will be asked to rate the others, the preference. They will have to choose which one they want to see first, which one they want to see second. And after they have seen all of the 4 choices of the others, they have only like 3 seconds to process if they want to change their opinion or not. And then there's the reward part. So the screen every time is pretty busy, a lot of stuff going on the screen. So why did we do this? Why bother? So it's actually enhances ecological validity. So as mentioned at the beginning, quite a lot of the social influence tasks, so the social information is given as an averaged group opinion. It is averaged, right? And we do not know what is the individual choices from the others. And here, if there are 5, I can see 4 of the others. And we could be able to see 4 individual choices of the others. So this enhances ecological validity. So in real life, we do interact with each individuals. We do not really interact with the average group of people, right? So this is the difference. And this design also allows us to dissociate reward-based information and socially based information. I guess this is obvious. And using this reversal learning task, it is suitable for applying computational modeling, and this allows us to answer questions, the second level of David Marr, so the algorithmic level. And this kind of design feature also enables us to parametrically test the effect of group coherence. And this is clearly or closely related to the first one. In terms of the average group opinion, we do not have that. Instead, we have a individual choice from the others. And then there is the parametrical effect of the group combination. So what that means? So that means if there are 5 people, I am able to see 4 people in front of me. And then the 4 choices of the others could have different combinations. So it can be that out of the 4, 2 people choose blue and 2 people choose yellow. It can also be that 1 choose blue, 3 choose yellow. It can be that nobody chooses blue, but everyone, they are preferring the yellow option. So here, this is the group coherence. And if we are using an average group opinion, it is not possible to do this way, right? So here, this is we call a parametrical test, because there's the parametrical part of the experimental design. And also depends on which one I chose in the beginning. If I choose yellow, I will be in line with the majority of the group in this case. And if I choose blue in the first place, I will be against the majority of the group. So here what I'm trying to plot is that I will show you two curves. One is with group opinion and the other one is against group opinion or decision. So with group decision and against group decision. On the x-axis is the group coherence. The group coherence or consensus is this combination of the colors on the x-axis. On the y-axis is the switch probability. So how likely that the participants is changing from their initial choice to the opposite, so the switch probability. You can now already try to anticipate what you might see in on this graph. So if my initial choice is the same as the majority of the group, the more confirming information I see, the less likely that I will switch, right? This is quite obvious, I guess. And then the opposite is also quite obvious in the sense that if I see opposing opinion or decisions from the group, the more I see the opposite decisions, the more likely I will change from my initial to the opposites. Okay, so this is the choice part. So we measured choice switch probability as a function of group coherence, also as a function of how what the relation is in terms of the group with versus against. So we also have the bet behavior. We have the 1, 2, or 3 behavior. We ask participants to bet twice, first on their own and then second after the group opinion. So what we did is that we plot the same, we did the similar plots, and the y-axis here is the bet difference, the second bet minus the first bet, essentially. So what we see here is that the more conforming decision I see, the more I am with the group, the higher I want to increase the bet. And then here for this against condition, and this is nearly unchanged statistically around 0, okay? Good. So when we have the behavior, this is the behavior readout. And after that, we just go through the modeling part. So before we model the entire thing, and the question you might want to ask yourself is that what to be modeled? There are a lot of things and what you want to put into your model. So usually what we do is that we go back to the task design to find out what are interesting specific recipes. When you are like cooking stuff, you put tomato, egg, and salt and sugar, everything inside. Those are your recipes. And here the same thing. So if we want to model something, we would like to have some recipes when doing the modeling. So go back to the design, what we had. We have the first choice, the first bet, and the second choice, and the second bet from the behavior, from the participants. And there are some different kind of social information. So here, they are the choice social information before receiving the reward. So here, what we call is instantaneous social information. Immediately after my choice, I'm able to see the choices of the others, and we call that instantaneous social information in this task. And after the feedback is delivered, there is also the social learning. So on top of the choices of the others, there's also the choices of the others. So we could use this part as a proxy of vicarious learning or observational learning, because we can see what the others are choosing and what the others are receiving. This is used as observational learning. And then the direct learning is obvious, right? We make our own choice. We receive our own feedback, and then this is the direct learning. So those are the recipes, and we could just try to find out what can be used to model that, to connect them, to glue everything together. So here, the first choice. First choice can be considered as a joint combination between self-learning and observational learning. So every trial, you are asked to make your first choice, even though this choice is making by yourself, but you carry the information from previous trials. Previous trials, how you could learn the information of the stimulus. You learn the information of the stimulus from your own experience, but you could also learn the value information of the stimulus from observing the others. So here we consider that every choice is a combination between self-learning and observational learning. And then after the first choice, you will see some social information here, and the participant could choose to switch or to stay. So you can choose to switch or to stay. Good. And the bad part is the similar idea. I wouldn't really go to the details. And then choice and bad, they determine the feedback per design, because this is the design feature, right? The experiment goes this way. And the outcome is then used to evaluate direct learning and social learning. And for the direct learning part, we just use some simple reinforcement learning algorithms. And for the social learning part, we used a cumulative reward function for the observational learning or vicarious learning. So you might have some questions, I guess, in the sense that why this way? I can show you later. But before that, I just want to show you a slightly nicer version of the diagram with some makeups. So everything is much clearer and nicer. Okay, good. So the question is why we do this way. Can you construct a different model? I guess, yes, that's obvious. So we did model comparison, in fact. So we have 3 classes of models. We have the non-social models, we have the social model with only the instantaneous social information, and we have the 3rd class of models where we combine the instantaneous information together with social learning. So we did model comparison. We compared a bunch of models. Here is actually only the most representative models. We've compared quite a lot. I have 200, 300 different versions. Sometimes the slight change, this is a different model, and we have to run and we have to compare. And every model is run using hierarchical Bayesian framework, using Markov chain Monte Carlo, and then we did model comparison also using live-out. But anyway, so what I'm trying to show here is that it's shown in red, this one. So this is the model of this. So this is the red bar. This is the winning model. We've tested quite a few different versions, and this one is the winning model. Now, what conclusion can be drawn here? The most significant, well, maybe let me try to avoid using the word significant. The most promising finding here is that if we go back to the Marr's 3 levels, the 2nd level, algorithmic level, we are trying to find out social specificity, right? This is the question. And what is the difference or dissimilar difference? Is that the same or different, right? So here what we show is that for the self-learning or direct learning, this algorithm is a counterfactual or fictitious reinforcement learning updates. And then the social part, it is a slightly different algorithm. So it is a cumulative reward history. So how well the others are performing in the recent past. Okay, good. And we did something else. So after model comparison, we know that model comparison only provides the relative information. We know that if there are 5 models, and we know there's model comparison, and then there's a winning one, fine. So the winning model is only the winning one relative to the other 5, relative to the other 4, within among the 5 candidate models. We do not know on the absolute scale how well the model could perform. So model comparison is relative. We want to know how well on the absolute scale the model performed. So for this aim, we did a posterior predictive check. So here what I show you on the graph is that you see that already. So the behavior, one is the choice switch probability, the other one is the bet difference. And we ask the model to simulate fake data. So we ask the model to generate data and then to compare if the model generated pattern could be the same, could match the actual pattern of the observed behavior. So it's indeed matched quite well. So here shown in this area, shaded area, they are the model predictions, and shown in this gray thinner line in the background, that they are the real data. So you see here, in this way is better. So to see the model generated data could actually match up the observed data of the behavior. So here, this is the average analysis, right? If we have the task, if I ask you to analyze the same thing, you might just come up with the same analysis on average. And our model actually did well, not only on this average data analysis, it also did well on this individual level. I'm not sure if you could see this clearly. So this solid darker blue line is the actual choice. And then there is a slight lighter color underneath. So this is the model prediction per participant. So this is data from 1 person. You see that there is a close match between the model behavior and the actual behavior, also on the 12 by 12 level. Good. The short summary up to here is that social influence affects both the choice and bet. So in terms of the choice switch probability, in terms of the bet difference, and this answers the question from the computational level and the algorithmic level. So we show that instantaneous social information predicts behavioral adjustment, either change of the choice or change of the bet. And we show that the learning is a weighted combination of direct learning and observational learning. And then the algorithm is actually different. One is a reinforcement learning like model, the other one is more like a reward, cumulative reward history computation. Good. Are there any questions? If you have. Okay, if not, I will proceed. So the modeling part takes a lot of time, and then the imaging part, actually, it won't take too long. So when we have the models, we go to the next level, right? Implementation level. So once we have the winning model, we could derive the model variables. So we have the model, we have the parameters, we could go back to the model to calculate, for example, the prediction error, for example, the value, for example, how much the value is integrated between self-direct learning and social learning. So those are the model-derived internal variables. And those variables could be entered into the MRI first level design matrix. And then this will enable us to find where and how this is associated with the brain area. So this answers the an implemental level question from the David Marr's. Okay, good. So what we did first is to look at if the V self and the V others, the direct valuation and vicarious valuation, how aware they are represented in the brain. So we put these things, two value signals, into the brain, and we found out that the V self here is associated with VMPFC, and the V other is associated with the ACC. And the next question is, naturally, what and where is the social specificity? So here, to answer this question, we employed kind of a double dissociation approach, and we found out that, so the VMPFC is only associated with V self, showing blue, and there is no relationship between VMPFC and V other. And conversely, the ACC is only associated with V other, so the social learning information, but this brain area is not associated with V self. So you see here, there's the social specificity, right? So in short, the ACC is the social learning part from this result. And VMPFC is the self or direct learning part. And this echoes findings from monkey recordings. So in some monkey recordings, researchers find out that if the reward juice, for example, juice drops, if the juice drop is delivered to the monkey, so the OFC or VMPFC, it is fared, so there are more responses from the neurons there from that recording. And if the juice is delivered to another monkey, so there are two monkeys. So if I'm a monkey, I'm observing another monkey getting a juice reward. So the ACC part of the neuron is fired more relative to the self. Okay, good. And then the next part, what we want to look at is here. So if the self-learning is updated using a reinforcement learning kind of framework, and we are able to calculate the reward prediction error. And the reward prediction error, what it is. So that is the difference between the actual reward, what you actually get, and the anticipated or expected reward of the task. So this is the difference, this is the reward prediction error. And if we put this prediction error into the model, we find that the the ventral striatum and the nucleus accumbens, they are associated with the reward prediction error. And we moved a little bit forward to find out if this is the reward prediction error signal or only the outcome valence information. So that means what? That means in the literature, you always find out that the PE, the prediction error signal, is highly correlated with the outcome signal. So these two are highly correlated. And oftentimes, people put either the PE regressor or the reward regressors, either of these two, into the MRI analysis. They will nearly always find similar responses here in the ventral striatum. So the question here is, if I put two things into the model, but I find the same location, so how can I know if the brain area here is associated with prediction error or the reward? I have no idea, right? So the solution to this question is that we have to use the second part, the second component of the PE signal. So we know that PE equals reward minus the value or the expectation. So naturally, here there's a positive correlation, and here there's a negative correlation, because here there's a negative sign, right? So what we're trying to find at neuron level is that we would like to find if the neural activity, the brain signal, the both signal in this particular case, if that is also positively correlated with the reward and at the same time negatively correlated with the value. So here what I show is the behavioral level, the computational level. PE is negatively correlated with value but positively correlated with the reward. This is to confirm this pattern. At the neuron level, what we show is here that the both activities from the ventral stratum, it's indeed positively correlated with the reward. And at the same time, it's negatively correlated with the value. So here it shows that the activity or activation here, it is indeed associated with the prediction error, not only the outcome valence, positive versus negative. So why am I telling you this? This is because this curve time series analysis is quite important for justifying a social prediction error that I'm showing you in the next slides. Maybe two more. Okay, so here what we showed more is that what is the brain activation when participants are seeing more opposing opinion. The more opposite choice they see, the more activated are here, 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 and here. So ACC and the frontal polar cortex, anterior, insular, bilateral, and also TPJ, also bilateral. I'm only showing you the right hemisphere, but bilateral. And the twice switch behavior. So when the participants are changing from their initial choice to the opposite, and then the associated brain activation is this dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And this is whole brain corrected. So the cluster is small, but actually not that small. So both of the findings, either here, the dissenting or opposing social information, and here, this brain choice adjustment related activation. So both of these, they are quite in line with literature reported from previous studies in humans, also in animals, especially this one. Okay, good. So here, this is more important. We were interested in how the brain regions are interacted. So we have identified brain areas that are associated with reward processing, self-learning, social learning. Okay, good. So we have also identified brain regions that are associated with processing the social information, like the insula, like the TPJ, for example. And then the next question is, are they connected? Or if so, how they are connected? How are they connected? The question we were trying to ask is whether or how the behavioral adjustment modulates the functional connectivity between the brain social center and the reward center. So to answer this question, we employed two connectivity analysis. So the seed region is the RTPJ. You can ask me why we chose RTPJ. We tried nearly everything, but this is the seed that resulted in significant findings. So we chose here the seed region, the right temporal parietal junction, the RTPJ, and we used two types of connectivity analysis. So one is the psychophysio interaction, and the other one is the physio-physio interaction. So for the PPI, the psychophysio interaction, so here the psychological variable is whether they switch or stay the behavior. And the PPI, the physio-physio interaction, here the second seed is the seed that is associated with the switch stay behavior. So here, remember that this result is the result from the contrast here, right? So we see if the behavioral adjustment modulates the connectivity. So this is direct answer to the question. And what we could anticipate is that if we could also find some reward-related regions like VMPFC, like ventral stratum, ACC, for example. So how the results tell us. So we have first the PPI, psychophysio interactions, the switch stay as the psychological variable, and then this is the seed. And what we found is that there is activation in the putamen. So there's some drawing. Okay. So we were wondering if we found some results here in the green area. What computations that carry results, right? Here we have the seed region, we have the psychological variable, we have the finding, we have the results. And what this result tells us, does that have some computational functions in terms of the model, okay? So here, because this putamen is just part of the striatum, and we just first tested if this is also a reward prediction error signal. And recall that prediction error is P equals R minus V. And essentially, we just used the same analysis, the time series analysis of this RP signal, reward prediction error signal. And what we observed is that the activation here is positively correlated with the reward. Yes, good, but there's no negative correlation with the value. So this cannot be justified as a reward prediction error if we really follow, we believe the time series analysis I showed you 2 or 3 slides earlier. If that is not a reward prediction error, so what can that be? So we then ask ourselves, what can that be, right? The same question. So because the switch and stay and also here, this social information processing part, those are related to social information. We wonder, well, does that encode a social prediction error? And this is a little bit data-driven, I think, but actually is not. So because we went back to this experimental design, we find what can be relevant for the participants to go on, to move on in this task. So what is a social prediction error? Again, prediction error is something you actually receive minus something you expect. So here, what is the actual social information is that the agreement. So how much you expect the others will show agreements. How much agreement you will observe from the others. This is the actual one. And here, this is the expectation. How much you expect the others will be agreeing on each other's choices. So here then the social prediction error equals the actual social information minus the expected social information. And we did the same time series analysis and we found that there is a positive correlation between here, the activation, and also the actual social information. At the same time, there is a negative correlation between the activation here and the expected social information. Essentially, if both of the correlations, they hold, then this justifies the prediction error signal. And because those error signals are related to social information, and then this can be called as a social prediction error signal. Good. And very lastly, we had a physio-physio interaction. There are 2 seed regions. One is the right CPJ, and then the other one is the DLPFC. And using 2 seed regions, we find out where in the brain are associated with the interaction term of these 2 brain areas. And the result showed that showing green is very interestingly that it overlaps partially here with the VMPFC and the ACC reported previously. So what you could tell from here is that the connectivity here, physio-physio interaction, the resulting part is then revert back. So goes back, looping back to the direct learning associated with VMPFC and social learning associated with the ACC. And then as one example, we could see the activation here. There's the 3-way thing. So x-axis is activation activity from the RTPJ. And here, this is the activity from the VMPFC. And according to this high or low DLPFC, you see there's a difference in terms of the connectivity. Nearly done. If you have any questions. Yeah, good.
因为马上有好几个问题了。
好，马上这个就完了。Yes. So the very last thing is that we have those findings, and we were trying to build a network of social influence of decision making. But actually, this is only a summarizing slide of all those findings we have reported previously. So here we have the direct learning and observational learning, and the prediction errors, reward or social, and also the instantaneous social information, and here also the switch stay behavior of the participants. And on top of the summary I gave before, here, if we focus on the implemental level, so the dissociable value signals are represented respectively in the VMPFC and the ACC, and then the connectivity analysis reveals a network of social influence in social decision-making. Good. So if I left out quite a few details, and if you're interested in the paper is in press, and I think it will be online in about 2 weeks. And if you cannot wait for 2 weeks, and then there is always a preprint that you can go to see the paper. There is some slight difference between the published version and also the preprint. And then here, this is my PhD supervisor and also some research assistants and the people who helped the MRI scanning. There is the last part. So it's like a shameless self-promotion. I have quite a lot of channels, so website, Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, Bilibili, whatever. And then I teach 2 courses. One is computational modeling, the other one is decision neuroscience. You can find here and here. And then if you are interested in this practical, more implementing how to implement models and how to interpret parameters, and then there are these 2 papers you can go to if you're interested in. So with that being said, I thank you a lot for your interest, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much， 非常精彩的报告啊。好，现在下面看那个各位老师和同学的话有没有问题，然后你可以举手，举手的话我可以把那个麦克打开，或者是留言在那个留言板上也可以。